All right. Here we go again. Hi, Cassie.
Hey, how's it going?
Going good. Hi, everybody out there. Share the link if you would, so people know we're here. Today, we're going to tackle a few topics that are near and dear to our hearts, especially Ben Shapiro coming to town. Very
our favorite.
excited about that. Yes, I know everybody is in their feelings about Ben bringing the Daily Wire crew to Tennessee, because just what we need is more white dudes who don't think racism is an issue. Truly ugly stuff, and no surprise that he feels like they're going to be right at home here in Tennessee. Again, follow the Holler at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook. Follow all the Hollers all throughout the state. Thank you to everybody who contributes. You guys help make that happen. Every dollar helps a ton. If you chip in $10 a month or more, we're going to send you a Holler hat. Jason has one. He calls it his favorite hat ever. I'm wearing one. Cassie's wearing one. We have,
I think Jason and I are matching.
All kinds of colors here. We have pink ones. Look at these hats. So if you guys want a hat, chip in, keep us going. It all really helps. And we have other places we want to add: Clarksville, Murray County. We have more that we want to end up adding. So today we're also going to be joined by Justin Jones. Pretty exciting. He should be here in a few minutes. That is pretty awesome. I haven't talked to him since his 62-day stint outside the Capitol. You know, I know that took a toll on him, and I haven't really seen an interview with him after that. So I think this is really the first time he's jumping on. What do you think about that?
I'm really excited. I hope he's doing okay. And I think I've seen, at least on Instagram, that he's been taking some time for himself. I hope that he feels a little bit refreshed, because as you said, I'm sure that took a toll. I mean, he just did such an amazing service for our state. And all the people that were out there did as well. And yeah, it's really kind of crazy how mainstream media just doesn't really cover, even, you know, more liberal media just doesn't really cover protest the way that I think that they should.
62-day protest at the time. I believe it was the longest running protest in the country. Really didn't get a whole lot of coverage. So we'll talk to Justin about that. Stick with us. A couple of things that we touched on last time, in case you missed it. Steve Dickerson, senator in Nashville, was popped for multi-million dollars worth of Medicare fraud. He is still running for office in Nashville. A PAC called Better Future PAC, run by Wade Monday, called on Steve Dickerson to disclose the terms of his settlement and tell us what it was. He's running for Senate again in a tight race in Nashville. So if you know people in Nashville, make sure they know that Steve Dickerson is a crook. His CEO is in federal prison, and he probably shouldn't be running for Senate again, but he is. And I really hope that they don't send him back.
Yeah, I mean, Heidi Campbell is running against him. So definitely give her a look. And regardless, like, we shouldn't have, you know, criminals in office. And
yeah, that's a wild thought, isn't it?
It's pretty wild. I mean, you know, when it goes all the way to the top, it's kind of hard to have any sort of level of well, I guess it is consistent in that we have lots of criminals in office, unfortunately. But yeah, it's pretty terrible. And he really the public deserves to see, as Wade said yesterday, the public deserves to see what went down in that court case and what exactly he did wrong, because there are all these allegations. It was settled in court. He paid a good chunk of money, right?
Yeah,
I can't remember how much
supposedly he pocketed like $6 million.
Right.
He wrote like 750 false prescriptions, and here he is running again. So definitely let people know Steve Dickerson is not who people should vote for. I also want to let people know, I forgot to mention, this is the Holler Hour. We want to hear from y'all. So please, that was my best attempt as a New York, California guy to say y'all. I've been trying. We want to hear from you guys. So please let us know if you want to jump in and holler about anything. Message us for the link. We will give it to you. You can jump on from anywhere about anything, no matter what you want to talk about. Robin Kimbrough Hayes, who just ran for the Senate, is asking about t-shirts. We do have t-shirts. There's merch on the website. Go to tnholler.com. There's a merch store there, and you can sport a Holler t-shirt. And yes, Justin Jones will be on here too. We also have a comment from McBride JM saying, "Fuck this little troll coming to our area." The emotion that Ben Shapiro elicits from people is quite passionate. So we're definitely going to talk to Justin Jones about that. A few things. Let's just go ahead and talk about this. The first headline was from The Nashville scene deserves
so
a lot
good.
of credit. They said, asshole moving to town. Ben Shapiro announced he and the Daily Wire are coming to Nashville. Thanks, we hate it. So good. Like, honestly, I am so impressed by that because I don't even think we would have written that headline. And I like to think of us as like the fire breathers around here. But no, I could look at that all day long.
Yeah.
And then this one was almost as good. This is from The Independent.
Oh,
Ben Shapiro thinks he's welcome in Nashville. Bless his heart. For people who aren't in Tennessee, like, bless his heart is like saying fuck you. It's the Southern genteel way of saying fuck you. So that headline is actually almost as good as this headline, not quite as good. So hats off to both the Independent and Nashville scene, and hats on to Governor Lee, who said, welcome to Tennessee, Real Daily Wire. So he took the time to welcome Ben Shapiro, even though Justin and the protesters were outside of the Capitol for 62 days, and never, ever, ever heard from him. One other thing about this, and we're going to show some clips of who these guys are so that you guys can understand why there's so much anger towards Ben Shapiro moving here. But one thing you should know is that this is his cousin, Mary Elizabeth Wilson. She is his cousin, and she is quoted about him saying that growing up is great because you get to choose which relatives you spend time with and which ones you cut out of your life without any regret. So that is his own cousin saying that about him on Wikipedia, which I thought was pretty amazing. And then Justin had some things. W. Kamau Bell said Nashville doesn't care about Ben Shapiro's feelings, talking about the asshole moving to town headline. And then Justin says we have enough racist monuments we're trying to move already. So, definitely people have some intense feelings one way or another about Ben Shapiro. And there are reasons for that. Tweets like this: what is the evidence that Black Americans wake up knowing they could be murdered just for being Black? What is the evidence to justify this proposition? Asks this white guy who apparently doesn't speak to Black people ever. I mean, to just really dismiss the feelings of Black people in that way is so ugly. And, it's so clear that this guy needs to have an intervention, frankly, and be around more people because, if you talk to Black people in your life, that they are having conversations with their kids that white people don't need to have with their own kids. And that in itself is a problem.
Right. Yeah. He's just a blatant racist, and you can find, thank you, Sam. I mean, fuck Ben Shapiro. I think we can all resoundingly agree with that. But yeah, Justin, I'd actually really be curious to hear your thoughts on this because I've seen, I think I tweeted something out from the Holler that, called him we called him a white supremacist because of these views that he has. I mean, he propagates like white supremacist views all the time. So like, what else are you supposed to call him? And I saw someone commented and said, oh, well, how can you say that he is of Jewish heritage?
Yes. And yes, I'd like to weigh in on that. Sure. First of all, so people know I'm Jewish. My grandparents survived the Holocaust. They're now passed. Jean and Harry, I should say their name. I'm sure my mom is watching, so she'll like to hear that. Jews can be racist, everybody. Like, that's possible. They shouldn't be because they've been through a lot. Like, we should know what it's like to be targeted. And, but and then the person who you're talking about also said, well, there's a difference between white supremacist and racist. I mean, to me, that's a distinction without a difference. Like, if you're racist, it's because you think that one race is superior to another. Right. He may not be wearing a hood on his head, but to be racist is to believe that white people are superior. And just in time to talk about racists like Ben Shapiro is our friend Justin Jones. Justin, how are you, man? It's so good to see you.
Great to see
you all too. Thanks for having me today.
Of course, man. First of all, let me ask you, is that a 62-day hair growth?
Yes. Mixed with the coronavirus, the barbershops being closed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, Justin, first of all, I just want to say we're going to talk about Ben Shapiro because I saw that you had some serious thoughts about that. And, I definitely want to get your opinion and your feelings, and it's all linked together. But first, I don't feel like I've talked to you since the protest, since the 62 days that you spent out there. I know you've taken some time to yourself. How are you feeling? And, what was your general takeaway from the protest?
Yeah, I'm feeling I'm feeling hopeful of all the young people who turned out, but still, we still are disappointed in how the governor chose to respond to the protest by criminalizing protests even further, by increasing penalties on protests. And so, just still trying to process that and figure out how can we move forward against this very unconstitutional law that these extremists in Tennessee passed. To me, it's the most anti-protest legislation. We've talked to people across the nation, and it's the worst legislation that they've seen in any state right now. And so Tennessee's making those headlines again. But what gives me hope is that there's so many young people, multiracial movement of young people who took that plaza, who've reclaimed that plaza. It will forever be Ida B. Wells Plaza. It will forever be a place of resistance to the white supremacy and hatefulness that happens in the building across the street. And so that's what gives me hope. And just talking about Ben Shapiro, I think it's just so interesting that we were out there 62 days non-violently. We kept the area clean. We had dance classes. We had food. We help our friends who are houseless. And the governor chose not to meet with us, to say, I would not meet with you. Instead, I'll arrest you and put barricades and lock the door. But we have a white supremacist media publication coming, and the governor gives them the red carpet welcome, saying, we're so excited to have you in Tennessee. Welcome. You have all these politicians welcoming them. And so to me, it seems like in Tennessee, free speech, the First Amendment, the Constitution, which we celebrate today, Constitution Day, only applies to those who are white, straight men in Tennessee, not to all of us. And that's disappointing as well.
Justin, first of all, let me just tell you how proud I am of you and everybody that was out there. I know it wasn't just you, for being out there. And I know that the legislation was super ugly and they deserve to be called out for what they're doing. But I do sort of think that in that way, you achieved your goal, which is just like with Selma and crossing the bridge, they exposed the dark hearts of the people with those billy clubs, and that led to progress. And I think you all did that too. You showed us how dark and ugly the spirit is of this Republican supermajority, of Governor Lee, who was afraid to meet with you, but not only you, Tennessee Black Caucus. Mm-hmm. And, so in that way, it seems like you were very successful, even though there's now a really ugly law on the books. Do you feel that?
Definitely. I think, one thing that one of my civil rights mentors, Diane Nash, taught me is that power only shows itself when it has to. And so what's happening is that we see power revealing itself. We see them, they're fighting us back. Their resistance to us shows us that what we're doing was making an impact. If protesting did not make an impact, they would not be passing laws during a special session to criminalize it and to stop it. They were impacted by that. They were afraid of that. The governor, they called that meeting about this bus. They said, okay, maybe this will get them to leave. We said, no, governor, that was just one of our demands. And so they said, okay, we'll ignore them. And then we'll fight them. We'll arrest them 200 times, raid their camp. And every time we said, you take it down, and we'll put it right back, put it right back, put it right back. And so we say the same thing to our democracy in Tennessee, is that they try and take it down and we'll put it right back. The governor is not the final authority in our state. The legislature is not the final authority in our state. We are going to the courts. We've been working, we've been talking to many lawyers about it. We're going to challenge this in the courts. We still have court dates for our own, arrests that are happening. Mm-hmm. And we're going to challenge it as unconstitutional. The day after that bill passed, they passed that, they brought me in before the court to try and get an ankle bracelet put on me and to ban me from the Capitol again. And I'm thankful for the judge that day. The judge said we cannot allow constitutional rights to be attacked in this way. It sets a very dangerous precedent. And so that was a victory that day after the court, when the lawmakers, aligned with some prosecutors, said we're going to try and shut them up this way. And that didn't work. And so I agree that this is a victory, that we were out there 62 days. Again, young people who the state would rather not hear their voices, rather not see. They were irritated with us being out there, held that plaza and created an alternative community based on democracy, based on a multiracial vision, based on uplifting marginalized voices of Black people, based off of mutual aid, where we were never without food there. We were never without water, because the community kept coming day after day to drop off new supplies. To me, it was the greatest example of the beloved community that I've seen in all my years of activism. And that's what we're fighting for. And that's the vision of Tennessee that we're going to achieve if we continue pushing this movement.
That's really amazing. Yeah. I mean, I just want to echo what Justin said, Justin Canoe said, and just thank you for what you did. And it's just, it's good to see you as well. And I hope that you're able to, at least take it easy a little bit now, take a little bit of a breather. I know that you're always working for justice, but hopefully you've been able to take care of yourself and everything. And it's just good to see you. And I have a question as well, just like Justin, Canoe and I were talking before you got on about the media coverage of your protest. And I know that it was like, at least within mainstream media, I mean, you did get some coverage, and I think some of it was good, and I'm glad for that. But what is your overall impression of how your protest was covered, and what do you wish had been different?
I think it's sad that some media chose to just cover when the law was passed. And we have to stress to everyone, the law was not passed in a vacuum. The law was passed because of a movement that happened that the law was trying to stop. And so we talk about this law as like, oh, this just came out of nowhere. And even some media had to talk to some national media and say, this came after 62 days of protesting. It's a direct response. And so even though the governor chose not to meet with us, this was his response to us. And it's also why we're going to replace him come this next time he's up for re-election. But what happened with this law being passed was that now all the national media is talking about it. And all the, you had Congress members like Ayanna Pressley, you had the NAACP, you had the ACLU national writing about this. And those groups, who we've been trying to reach out to. And so, I'm glad that so many groups are now taking attention, putting attention onto this issue. But we have to say that we should not wait till rights are taken away for us to take them seriously. That everything we learned in the civil rights movement is that we only have the rights we have because we not only fought for them and gained them, but we maintained them. And so the same thing with voting rights. Like a lot of us are now seeing these attacks on voting, and you had civil rights elders saying you only can keep these rights if you fight for them. No one would have ever guessed that the right to protest would be taken away in Tennessee in such an extreme fashion. But we knew this because we know who they were. This is not surprising to me when you look at who Governor Lee is. He's a man who's defended white supremacy in symbol and in policy. Like Canoe always says, he doesn't pass laws, they pass lawsuits in our state. They're in court again over this anti-abortion, where they have to tell doctors to lie to patients about abortion procedures. They're in court over these voucher laws that are taking money from public education to put into private schools that's based in a racist history. And so we know who Governor Lee is. He dressed up in Confederate uniforms as a student. And so today he doesn't have that uniform on, but he still has that mentality on. And so again, this is not surprising to me. And I'm glad for the media who were out there. There were some amazing reporters out there, particularly, in Tennessee, Holler was out there, and some amazing reporters of color who really stood out there and who were out there telling the story that needed to be told, and who were not just saying it from like a very headline, position, but we're actually getting to know why we were out there and what was the different facets of this intergenerational movement. People who were houseless, what brought us here together? Because most of the people in the plaza, we did not know each other. Everyone says that they were brought to the plaza for a reason, and they found purpose, and they stayed. And so that's the most beautiful thing, is you have young people who had never been activists before, now engaged in a lifelong commitment to activism. So many of our young people, I don't have it on me. I'm a little scared of needles right now, but I'm gonna try and get it. But so many of the young people got tattoos saying "Good Trouble" as a way to commemorate this summer. And that's just something that I thought was so powerful.
That's beautiful, and it segues me perfectly into what I was about to say, which is that I think while you were out there, John Lewis passed, and Republicans throughout the state lamented his death, praised his life, talked about what a wonderful guy he was. Meanwhile, they're vilifying you and everybody who was out there who are doing exactly what John Lewis would be doing in this situation. The hypocrisy is deep and endless. To act like John Lewis was a great man, or you think John Lewis was a great man, and then turn around and criminalize the very act that he partook in is absolutely outrageous. And then on top of that, you had people like Senator Jack Johnson saying that the protesters were paid. So I want to give you a chance to address that directly. What do you have to say to people like Senator Jack Johnson, who voted to keep the KKK Grand Wizard bust in our state capitol, who is dismissing the protests as paid protesters who weren't even from Tennessee?
Yeah. Well, definitely, your first point about John Lewis, we were there in the tradition of Good Trouble, as well as C.T. Vivian, another civil rights leader who passed away, who has Nashville roots. And so I think, it's interesting that we love to celebrate activists in death, and we love to kind of make it seem like the civil rights movement is over, but it's not over. And the plaza showed us that the movement continues, and it continues not by just renaming streets and putting up, memorial markers, but it continues by us continuing that tradition of Good Trouble that John Lewis called us to. He wrote a letter in his death that was published, as you saw, and he commended young activists, said, "I was inspired by you." One of the last places he visited was Black Lives Matter Plaza in DC. I mean, the spirit of John Lewis was alive in the plaza. And to this other point of these white supremacists like Jack Johnson, these extremists, condemning us as being paid, condemning us as being outside agitators. As you saw, the day after the vote, I was able to talk to Senator Jack Johnson, or at least tried to when he walked out the meeting, and he refused to talk to me. And my simple questions to him were, were you born racist or did you become racist? Because honestly, that is what we must ask them, is that racism is not just about having a black friend, but racism is about policies that you pass. Racism is about him passing laws that protect a Confederate racist KKK leader statue, but do not protect voting rights, do not protect healthcare, do not protect our right to peaceably assemble in the state. And so Senator Jack Johnson, again, represents this long lineage of extremists who've stood against movements for progress throughout our history. And so just like we have John Lewis's in our history, we also have George Wallace's. We also have, these other leaders who stood as barriers to progress. And so Jack Johnson, Governor Bill Lee, Speaker Cameron Sexton, Leader William Lambert, they are on the wrong side of history. And I'm afraid that history will not be kind. When our children read history books, they will be looked at like the George Wallaces of our day and the Bull Connors of our day, because then once again, they're on the wrong side of history.
And it's so clear, like there's no question that it feels like when we look back at this, when, generations are now voting, when younger people are voting, when we evolve as a society here in Tennessee, that we are going to look back at these guys in that way. And it's just so striking to see it right here with us. One of the videos that came out last week was an interview with a Grand Dragon who was born in Tennessee in Roan Mountain. And they were asking him about monuments, about statues, and his answers for why we had to preserve them were exactly the same as the answers that are coming from these legislators in committee and in the state capitol commission. Exactly the same answers. So, I completely agree with you that this is a long tradition of people standing in the way of progress and standing in the way of history. And the only way we keep moving forward is by taking action the way that you have and the way that everybody is every single day. This is not a fight that ends in November when an election happens. Elections are markers in the road, but they are not the destination. And everybody who's involved needs to understand that no matter what the result is in November, this keeps going and everybody needs to be involved. Justin, on that note, and I don't want to keep you forever, I really appreciate you jumping in here. I know that I've been hounding you to come on for a long time and you needed your time, and I want to give it to you. But I do want to ask you, what now?
What now? I think the key thing is to continue to bring new people to the movement. I think that's what the plaza really taught me, is that, again, I was not there by myself. It was a movement of people. And so to see all these young people who had never really been involved, some of them had said it was their first protest, but who chose to spend the night and then just were there for, 50, 60 days. I think that's what we have to do, is we have to inspire a new generation to say that it is okay to seize your power now, that we don't have to wait until you have a title or degree, but you have power now. And in fact, your power is more powerful than those people in the state capitol, because look at what you do when you just simply sit out there and sing, our songs, "The plaza belongs to the people, we're not going to stop till we equal." That makes people, the 200 state troopers tremble to a fact where they have to pass laws to get you away. It makes a governor who's the highest authority in our state so afraid that he won't even come out the office to meet with you and will lock the door and go out back entrances to get away from you. That is power. And that's the power of the people that has transformed the South and transformed the nation throughout our history. It's the same power that, led people like Diane Nash to get on those buses and say, we're not going to allow violence to overcome nonviolence. And so I say the same thing with this law, is that we're not going to allow a racist, Jim Crow law to stop us from protesting. We're re-strategizing, yes. We're regrouping, yes, but we're not stopping. And that plaza then and now and always will belong to the people. And so we're planning to continue to challenge this law in the courts and in the streets. We're planning to help continue to engage voter turnout, but we know that elections alone are just one tactic. Everyone's saying go vote, go vote. But what we need is, as I told Mike Bloomberg when he came to Nashville, is we need a revolution. We need a revolution that will. And people are like, well, revolution, but a revolution is about rebuilding. It's about getting things at the root and saying that there's a better way than what we're doing. And so, yes, we're going to vote, but also we're going to try and empower some of these young people who've been in the streets to also maybe run for office. We're going to empower some of these young people to go to these meetings and say, we're going to sit in the legislative meeting when they come back in January. Hopefully COVID will be done. They'll let us in, but we're going to go be outside if not, and we're going to hold them accountable and let them know that you are temporary public employees. You are not a king. You are not a god. You are an employee. And if you don't do your job right, you can be replaced. You can be evicted. And that's what we have to do, is we have to remind them that we really have the power. And that's the thing that's really giving me hope. The other thing I would say to everyone is, I know there's been a lot, and I've been tweeting about it, about Ben Shapiro moving to Nashville, and these white supremacists. And I think that what's even more dangerous than the white supremacists who wear the sheets, and even Ben Shapiro and Tommy Lauren, I would say, are the white supremacists who wear suits and who pass laws. That's who we have to pay attention to, because that's who's really impacting our lives. People like Ben Shapiro are dangerous because what they do is their racist rhetoric, their hateful rhetoric gives validation to hateful actions. I think we cannot separate Ben Shapiro's rhetoric from what we're seeing at the border right now, where you have migrant women of color having their uteruses taken out. Because you have hateful rhetoric, it legitimizes hateful action. You cannot separate Ben Shapiro from these white supremacists who are running over protesters. Hateful rhetoric validates hateful action. We have to keep repeating it. And not only that, but we have to look at what's going on at the legislature. Excuse me, I'm kind of getting worked up here, because that's what really disturbs me, is seeing people like Jeremy Faison, seeing people like our U.S. Senate candidate, Bill Haggerty, seeing people like Governor Lee say, "Oh, we love you, Ben Shapiro. Welcome to Nashville. You will feel at home here." Why would we make a white supremacist feel at home here, but make your own people who've lived here, who've been out here, people of color, feel like their lives are at risk? Why would you allow someone who's condemned Muslims and who's put them at risk feel welcome here, while making your own constituents who are of many different faiths, including Muslim, feel unsafe and unwelcome here? It makes me very upset, because I think that they have this vision of Tennessee that is based off of this ideal image of the Southern aristocracy that is dead. The Confederacy lost. I'm sorry, Bill Lee. I'm sorry, to his friends, but you guys lost, and it's time to get over it. And let's build a multiracial democracy based off of human rights and environmental protections and racial justice. Let's build a democracy that really is the America that we never were. And that's what we have to do.
Well, I am with you. I definitely agree that there's a direct line between a lot of the policies that we're seeing and the rhetoric. I think that that's what we're up against, is this steady drumbeat of talking points, coordinated talking points through the right-wing media. And they're really good at it. We don't really have that on the other side, to our credit and detriment. It's a much more fragmented messaging system, a much bigger tent. And on their side, they stay in line and they make sure that they are all saying the same things to each other. So we need to stay passionate and engaged. I truly believe there are more of us than there are of them. And, Ben Shapiro coming to Nashville is going to be interesting, because he now becomes your jurisdiction, our jurisdiction. The things that he says we're going to be watching them a lot closer. And it's no surprise that right-wing group is very excited about it, because he's going to become a megaphone for the Governor Bill Lees and Marsha Blackburns of the world. So, they're excited. Somebody said something here that I just wanted to address, saying, what are you really getting with this power? And I'm going to assume that it's a good faith question. And I think, you don't really know. Like, nobody knows where things are headed. I don't think, even the greatest activists knew exactly what was going to come of their actions, but they knew what they were up against, and they knew what ideals they were fighting for. And so I think, to me, that would be the answer. It's, what are you getting with this power that you're imposing? I think it's, you don't know, but you do know the difference between right and wrong. What would your answer to that be, Justin?
My answer would be is that by empowering people to know that they have power, it creates a more critically engaged citizenry. Like, that's the thing that we need, is we need people who are willing to critically analyze what's happening, not just blind followers. That's what's wrong with some of the people on the other side, is they just go based off of what one person says, and it is the law. It is the word of God for them. And so I think what we get with this power is we get to create an alternative vision. Like, not only are we fighting against something, but you have to fight for something. You have to have a proactive vision of what you're fighting for. And as I keep repeating, that is a multiracial democracy. It's a democracy in which we uplift the voices of impacted communities, those impacted by racism, those impacted by environmental degradation and poverty. That's who we need to be uplifting. And that's what power is about. I think, as Cornel West said, is that truth is allowing suffering to speak. And so part of power is that we want to allow suffering to speak. We want to bring suffering into the halls of power, so that when they deny passing healthcare expansion, we can have mothers who've lost children say, let us hear our voices. Let us hear our testimony of losing our loved ones. When we have them denying climate change, let's have people like my grandparents who are in the California Bay Area with all the smoke from these wildfires, can't even go outside with a red sun, looks like midnight in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Let's allow suffering to speak. And that's what power is. Power is about, I think a lot of people are afraid when we say like things like Black Lives Matter, because they feel like, oh, I don't matter anymore. Because they think that when we get in power, we will be like our opponents, that we will silence voices that are different than ours, that we will oppress them. And that's what makes them afraid. But the truth is that our vision for America, at least I can speak for myself, is very different than the vision of our oppressors. We do not want to become the evil we're fighting against when we're in power. We don't want to become the oppressors on the other side. That is not the vision of America we're fighting for. We're fighting for America that has a redeemed in its soul, that is at peace with itself, as Dr. King said. That's what we're fighting for. And in which, like for me, I'm 25 years old now. Like, I don't want to be out here sleeping outside the Capitol every day. I want to be able to hang out with my dog, my girlfriend, go out to, nature hikes. I love going to these waterfalls. That's what I want to do with life. And so power is about making it so that when my children come to this world, they won't have to put up with the same foolishness that we're putting up with every day, in which we have to be afraid of our lives because we're Black walking the streets, or we have to be afraid we'll climate crisis devastate our lives and our futures. Like, we don't want our children to have that anxiety of having to hide in their schools doing gun drills because of shootings in their schools anymore. We don't want that. We want to thrive and not only survive. That is what power can get us if we really work for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Cassie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was just really beautifully said. And I just wanted to kind of echo some of those points about power and about like what we are fighting for. And I completely agree with you. And I know I can speak for everybody on this broadcast right now, that what the left is fighting for, broad strokes, is to figure out how to make a world where you have the most amount of human flourishing for the most amount of people. Like, what kind of system can we create? What kind of society, what kind of culture do we want to foster that can provide those things for as many people as possible? And we know that a better world is possible. That's why we're fighting for it. And when you talk about power, I mean, I think that you can speak to that probably better than most people that I know. But at least, I organize with the Sunrise Movement, and we talk about this all the time. And what you were saying earlier about building, a revolution, a mass mobilization of people, it's the people, as you said, that have the power. But we have to organize and foster a good, healthy organizational environment that is fighting for this better world together. But we can only accomplish that if we do it together, because we do have the power. As you said so eloquently, you scared all of those legislators literally just by sitting outside of their building. Like, right. That is extraordinary. And so
just putting your bodies out there.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's something that we really need to work on the left, and that's what you're doing. That's what a lot of great organizations and groups are doing, is building this solidarity with the working class, with each other, and with literally the proletariat in this country. We don't really have a middle class as much anymore. It's what we need to build this together. So.
Couple of stories I just wanted to run by you guys while we have Justin here, and then we'll let you go. One is, did you see the story about a woman in Mississippi who lied about her address to get health care for her 3 kids and herself, and is now facing decades in prison for trying to get health care? I know you mentioned not passing Medicaid expansion in Tennessee. And when we posted about that, of course, there were a number of people who said, well, you shouldn't break the rules. But to be facing decades in prison in the richest country in the world, just because you want your kids to be able to see a doctor when they get sick, something is deeply, deeply wrong with that. And every single day I'm more reaffirmed in my conviction for Medicare for all. Justin, what do you think when you hear that?
I think it's ridiculous. And I definitely agree with your statement of having Medicare for all. And I cannot separate it from the fact that these lawmakers who, if they serve one term, they get healthcare from life that's paid for us here in Tennessee. You have Jeremy Durham, who's kicked out the legislature because of sexual harassing, dozens of women, suing to get his healthcare back. And so I think it's so interesting that what's good for them is not good for us, that they can have healthcare for life. They can have healthcare as a right, but we cannot. And look at how much money we give in corporate tax breaks in Tennessee to FedEx, to bring groups like HCA here. Like, we have so much corporate welfare, but when everyday people are saying that I don't want to hand out, I want to hand up, we criminalize them and put them in jail. I think it's immoral and it's extreme. And it is based off of this narrative of not having enough that is false. In our nation, because we look at who's really made profit and who's making all this wealth during this pandemic. People like Jeff Bezos, these corporations, this
hand over fist
quality.
Yeah. It's wild. It's
violence.
Getting worse and worse. I see that we have another guest here, Justin. You can stay. Do you want have something you want to say to Justin, Shane, or should we let Justin go?
I just want to say that Justin is like awesome at doing all this stuff in Nashville and trying to fight the good fight, and I think all of us across the state are really appreciative of your efforts to try to bring change and positive change in our state and to make our state a much better place to live and work. And I do also want to say that I agree with Justin on his sentiments about Ben Shapiro. And I do want to add Ben Shapiro's an asshole. He should stay in California.
Well, Shane, thanks for saying that. I think nobody on here will disagree with you. Cassie, do you know if Nathan wants to talk to Justin also?
I think Nathan.
Thank you so much.
I think Nathan had some things to say about Cookeville. I would need to check his message again, but I'm sure he'd be down to say hello.
All right, well, we're going to bring him in now, and then we'll let Justin go. Nathan, how are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Justin and Shane are still on here with us. If you have anything to say to them, and then we've kept Justin a long time, so I'm gonna let him go. But if
before you go, Justin, just want to let you know, I really appreciate everything you've been doing in Nashville, and come back or stick around and watch what I'm going to be talking about, because what you've been doing for the last 60+ days is influencing the direct, peaceful participation we've been able to take part in Cookeville in our rural community. So props to you for everything you're doing and the changes that you're making and the word that you're spreading. And it is making a difference out here in the rural areas too.
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you, Shane, and thanks, Nathan, so much. And we got to connect soon in person. Maybe when we'll come down to see y'all, we'll get the plaza up and going. We can get everyone to come outside of the Capitol for a day and scare the hell out of them, really.
There you go. Justin,
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Come back soon. And, again, from everybody on here and many, many more, thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And let's invite Ben Shapiro next time. We'll have a good conversation.
Anytime.
I mean,
we have been trying to get a Republican on here for 18 months, and nobody has taken us up on it. I genuinely mean it. Anybody who wants to come on here and holler at us, I don't care what party you vote with, jump on here. We want to hear from you. So absolutely would love to have Ben Shapiro on here. Justin, take care, brother.
Thank you.
All right, Nathan, talk to us. What's going on in Cookeville?
All right. Well, since August, we've been fighting an anti-panhandling ordinance.
Right.
It got to the ticket for the Cookeville City Council on August 20th. The first round of it didn't even get a second to vote. It just got shut down by the city council themselves. On September 3rd, it got reintroduced and was passed with a condition for public hearing.
Can you tell us real quick, just give us what is it real quick?
I'll go over it real quick.
Yeah.
So the ordinance itself, what it does is it bans panhandling without really offering a clear definition of panhandling to all the streets and intersections. They're calling them minor arterial, minor and major collector streets. So it's nearly every important major traffic intersection where the unhoused would be able to go and stand and have the benefit of being able to ask for help from the generous community of Cookeville. What this ordinance is doing is it's basically addressing a couple, just a few community complaints that are displeased or distasteful of the appearance of people who are less fortunate than ourselves. And this ordinance,
I'm just going to jump in and say that it's about 50 people has emailed the mayor or called him. They're mostly affluent individuals who are bitching about it.
Yeah. Now at the last council meeting, September 3rd, we got that number that about 50 people had been emailing them. But there's a strong movement of support for the unhoused, and not just in speaking out to city council, but in actually getting involved. We're able to get out there in person, on foot, find a way to go and help these people in our community.
How big of a problem is it, Nathan, in the area?
It's increasing. It's increasing. There have always been panhandlers in Cookeville for some period of time. Usually you'll see one, maybe two a week standing at the intersections of entrance ramps. In recent months, especially with COVID, we're seeing that number increase. It is a tangible change to our community. And there are rumors and purported proof that surrounding areas are bringing people in because Cookeville is a more welcoming community. And that's great. But we want to keep that, and we want to help address the issues causing people to become unhoused. We don't want to penalize people for being less fortunate than ourselves. But this ordinance is it's so awful. Like, it extends the the restrictions onto private property like gas station parking lots and banks, and there's mention of, you know, reasonable time and manner, but there's no definition of what those is or what is unreasonable. You know, it's just a blanket, wordy, we don't want to see you here kind of ordinance, where they find people with these civil citations in the name of being able to allow engagement from law enforcement to send them off to go get help from a substance abuse support program, which is new and it's great and it's doing awesome. It's been around 24/7 status with in an agreement with the city for just 2 weeks. And I got to speak with some of the folks that are working on that program, and it is paying off in spades.
So Nathan, how can people help, and you know, what can we share to help you guys out? I appreciate you coming out here and talking about it.
We need to spread the word. We need to make sure that people know that the unhoused community in Cookeville is present and needs help. One of the big issues that we have is that the existing options that we have are stretched, they're challenged. Some of them are faith-based, and that doesn't work for everyone. Some of them are they're just it's not the best fit. We need more people, more community members directly to be able to get out there and meet people where they are and help them with what they need, how they need it.
That
and
point
that
you just
differs by
on,
every person.
Yeah. I was just going to say that point you touched on is something that I think people in Tennessee need to hear, is that, you know, it's great to have faith-based solutions. That's helpful, but that's not a solution. If that was the solution, Tennessee has more churches than any other state, highest percentage of evangelicals. We wouldn't be at the bottom in poverty, at the bottom in maternal mortality, infant mortality, #1 in medical bankruptcies and rural hospital closures per capita. So let the churches do it, which is what we hear all the time in Tennessee. Tennessee is living proof that that is not an answer.
And also too, the one lone homeless shelter that we do have here in Cookeville does discriminate a lot. It heavily discriminates. And so if you're unmarried, or if you're an unwedded mother, or if you've been a woman who's been through spousal abuse,
you're gay,
yeah, God forbid if you're gay, then you can't get help. And then also you have to meet all of these certain criteria. You have to show up for your daily prayer study and read the Bible every day. It's just, there's so
jump
much
through hoops, right? It's not for everybody. Yeah.
And so a lot of the people who are homeless have only been homeless for probably within the last 6 months. It's been exacerbated. It started with the tornado, and the pandemic has really exacerbated this homeless crisis that is now starting to brew because of people have lost their jobs. Their jobs are not coming back, and they're now being evicted from their homes, or their homes are being foreclosed on. So right now, this problem, this is a problem that it wasn't a huge problem prior to the pandemic, but it's now quickly becoming a massive problem, when we've got to have solutions.
It's a clear example that we have a K-shaped recovery, not a V-shaped recovery, and not everybody is participating. So Nathan, Shane, definitely send us whatever information you have. We'll tweet it out and post and help you out. I'm bringing in Steven now. You guys can stick around. Steven, I know, wants to talk about a no excuse Congress. Steven, first of all, what's going on, buddy? Good to see you.
We'll see you guys.
I'm good.
So tell us about the no excuse Congress, and what are you hollering about us? Sorry.
The no excuse Congress is actually a rare opportunity that happens, that can happen this election, where basically the Democratic Party could flip enough seats in the Senate to go above 67 senators, which is 2/3. And of course, the entire House is up for election. A no excuses Congress is a Congress where the Senate is above 67 seats and in the House is above 290 seats. This would basically allow us to pass constitutional amendments to fix corruption guarantee a constitutional right to health care. But most importantly, it would allow the people to see the Democrats for how we deliver, and do we deliver when Republican obstruction is out of the way. So right. This is normally where do I
sign?
Well, the thing is, you can encourage your friends, especially in the red states where there's a Republican incumbent up, to vote a straight Democratic ticket, especially for your conservative friends who want to, show America, an unvarnished Democratic Party that doesn't have excuses. So,
do you think we have a chance?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance of getting those numbers?
I think it's actually possible this election, because of COVID and because of the trade war mess that the president created. Because
it's always nice to run across an optimist, Stephen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate a dose of optimism. I can never give it to myself.
Because it runs through rural America, and where the farmers are upset, where our communities are being damaged, and as well as the South, where the African American community is more united than it has been in the past as well, because of the craziness that the president has unleashed. So right. This is a rare opportunity.
I think it's definitely a great opportunity. I will say that should good things happen in November, the work will just be beginning to hold the people who win accountable and hold them to their word, and make sure that they deliver on a lot of the things that have been talked about throughout the election. I know Cassie's a Bernie supporter. I know that there's some severe lefties around here, and I know that they're planning to start the accountability process immediately. There will be no free lunches for anybody if good things were to happen. Shane, I see you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question. So since this applies to the House and the Senate, now how does this will apply if said constitutional amendments are pushed to the states? Because it takes 38 states to ratify a constitutional amendment, or you could go through the nuclear route, which is a constitutional convention, which is what the Republicans want to do, and blow up the entire Constitution. So how would this pledge work in the states because you have to have 38 states to ratify amendments?
Well, Shane, the thing is, it is that two-step process. The challenge is that once Congress does their job, they can let the states debate it for themselves and be able to have the people look at the amendments, see whether they like them or hate them, and have those debates within the states themselves. So you've got to clear the first part before you can get to the second part and be able to have that conversation.
Do you think that even, like the Democratic Party as a whole is untied enough from corporate interests to actually pass some of these things that the majority of the Democratic Party supports?
I think, Cassie, that that's why it's so important to do this, because, for most of my life, and I know a lot of people, they've, heard this thing where politicians will promise the sun, moon, and stars, but when they get in, the first thing they do is blame the other side for not delivering. And being able to elect this no excuses Congress would eliminate that ability. And so they would have to answer to the people in 2 years, at least in the House. But overall, they would have to answer completely, because once you have the other side out, the Republicans' obstruction question out of the way, you're debating with yourself, and the only thing and then leaving it to the states to decide, do they love it or do they hate it?
Well, I think that you make a good case and point, and the bottom line is we all need to turn out and get to the polls one way or another. Vote early. That's the main thing. I'm seeing a couple of comments on here One is from Derek Smith saying, I think that's a wonderful idea. I think he's talking about Ben Shapiro coming because my home state definitely needs more balance and not irrational, radical progressives creating more harm than good. To which I say, balance. Like, you think that the problem with Tennessee is that there's not enough conservative opinions in Tennessee? Like, you know, I appreciate.
Could we not have any more conservative opinions? Because before long, we're going to have the entire apparatus of Fox News moving here.
Right.
I know, it's like become a bastion with Tommy Lahren.
What progressive voices are there in Tennessee other than like Justin and Indivisible, the Holler? Like, we're trying to balance things out here, Derek. You should be thankful we have some irrational, radical progressives around here. And I will say the radicals are the ones in the legislature and in the governorship. Radical is not wanting everybody to have health care, better wages for workers, supporting unions, hospitals to stop closing, some common sense gun regulation, and equality for everybody. That's not radical. Turn off Fox News. And then you also said, Derek, if you really want to create a solution, bring me on an interview and let's debate. I have been saying every single Holler hour for a Republican to ask for this link and jump in here. So if you mean it, ask Cassie for the link and jump in and let's talk. That door is wide open. Comments are cheap. Comments are cheap. Yeah. All right. Well, you guys, I appreciate you both jumping in here. Shane, Steven, we're going to say goodbye to you guys. I'm going to play a couple of videos here, but jump in anytime. Shane, I think you're our first 2-time guest. So
I think I am. Yeah. Well, that's because I like to come on and bitch about things.
Good. So, that's what we're here for.
I do want to add one thing, though. Yeah. I want to urge people to, if you're in Cookeville tonight, please go to the city council meeting at 5:30. At the Cookeville Performing Arts Center, because the ordinance is up tonight. I don't remember if Nathan mentioned that, but it is up tonight for a vote for second reading. 5:30, and it's going to be at the Cookeville Performing Arts Center. They moved it there so they can have as many people there that they can. Well,
definitely send us some information about it and video if you get it and pictures, and keep us posted on that. We do have a Cookeville Holler, and I know that they've been on top of this, so I'm sure
I'll be at home streaming this. So
perfect. All right. Well, good luck to you guys. Thank you. Keep us posted. Steven, thanks for jumping on, buddy.
Thanks, Justin. Steven. Thank you, Cassie.
All right. Take care. All right, Cassie, while we still have a few people left here, there are a couple of videos that I wanted to play because, I like when we play some videos, and, anybody that's still, what's that?
Oh, sorry. I actually, just before we move to the next thing, I think that Robert, you flashed this comment that Robert put up. And I think, it's just very briefly, I definitely agree with like the sentiment, but I'd also push back on, I think this is exactly how capitalism is supposed to work, and that it's supposed to benefit the folks like at the top the most. It's working exactly as it should, without any sort of real regulation. So, I don't know. I think it's definitely, I think that things are working exactly as they should, and we need, in the minds of the elite, and we need to push back on that.
That's true. I will say though, like when we drift over into seeming to advocate for socialism, that's, I think, a fine line that we need to walk. So I think what we're looking for is balance, and, unbridled capitalism is greed. And greed is what we're seeing working we need a dose of both. We need to take care of each other. And we have that already. We have roads and libraries and the military and police and public schools. These are socialist programs by their definition. So, we need to find a balance, and we don't have that right now.
Right. The one thing that I would say, I think that it is a fine line. I completely agree with you. It's definitely like a lightning rod, and we need to be careful about that. We don't want to push people away. But there's a lot of red baiting that happened, over the course of the past 50 years throughout the Cold War, that did a lot of damage, like with just terminology in general, with propaganda. And the one thing that I will say, just like about socialism as a term, it's literally like democracy. So it's like, if you democratize your workplace, that's socialism. Or if you do, it's like injecting democracy into as many areas of society as possible. So,
well, that's true. And I'm glad we're having this talk. Socialism has a meaning, right?
Right.
Like, socialism means the takeover of the means of production by the state. And
not necessarily the state. It doesn't, that's one type of it. And there's other types where it's like it's more like decentralized. And so, I think that there is like state socialism, and that's, I think that's probably the most commonly thought of, and that like freaks a lot of people out, which I understand. I think that any sort of concentrated power needs to be like balanced out with something else.
But what I'd offer is that it does freak people. I mean, it freaks out not just Republicans, it freaks out Democrats, it freaks out, people who are good fit, like family members of mine, like, people who are educated. It's not a miseducation thing. It's socialism is not what the majority of the country wants. Democratic socialism is not socialism. And, I think people lose the thread, especially when Bernie and AOC are involved, because they just get blinded by, what they're told about them. But, the term is fraught, and, we have to play with the cards that we're dealt. I agree that we can do some work to, de-sting it a little bit, and, we shouldn't be afraid to lean into it. But I do think if we go around saying we want socialism, we're going to end up turning off a lot of people.
I completely agree. And I think that like we can get lost in just like terms all day, every day, when really we need to be pushing for like the actual policies that will help people, and instead of getting lost in like the theory necessarily. But, I just like, I think that at least going back to that comment, I just wanted to kind of push back on, like, I do think that like unrestrained capitalism, it's working exactly as it should. We need more restrictions. And that like just a common misconception about socialism is that it's actually like wanting to inject more democracy into as many areas of society as possible. And it doesn't necessarily have to be state socialism if you actually want to get into the theory of it. But
and what he's saying is that when corporations lose, the state steps in. So it's privatized gains and public risk. It's our money that bails them out. So that is socialism for them. And they never have a problem with corporate bailouts. They never have a problem when the government prints money to save the market. But when they want to actually step in to help people who are hungry, or, fully fund our education, or, whatever the progressive agenda is, Green New Deal, we say we're broke. So,
completely agree with that sentiment.
Against social, they're not against this stuff. They're just spouting talking points. And I think that's the point of what Robert is saying.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with that completely. And it's like, I agree with the idea that that's what's happening. But I think that
what do you have? What's in your craw? Is it that like I'm not comfortable with advocating for socialism?
Wait, what's it in my what?
It seems like you're like it's sticking with you that I'm not.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, you're fine. I guess, I don't know. I could talk about this all day, every day. I find this stuff fascinating. So we don't have to like belabor any sort of point or anything. And no, I'm not like asking you or anybody else to like necessarily subscribe to any sort of ideology. I just think that like being clear-eyed about who unbridled capitalism benefits, which I think we all are, is something that we need to be clear-eyed about, and we need to be cognizant that it's something that doesn't serve the majority of the people in this country, the way that the system works right now. So I'm not stuck on anything in particular like that.
No
I think
it's just about that.
I always I always have to think through this stuff as I'm talking about it as well. So
for the people who have bared with us through this, and we do appreciate it. A couple of things that I just wanted to play. The first one was this guy we're calling a president saying basically that blue state deaths don't matter
in this territory. And that's despite the fact that the blue states had tremendous death rates. If you take the blue states out, we're at a level that I don't think anybody in the world would be at. We're really at a very low.
First of all, he's wrong. Like that's just not true. And second of all, the idea that like, if you just take the blue states out, we did pretty good. I mean, like it's so dismissive. Imagine Obama saying, if you took out the red states, like who cares? Like the conniption that they would have. Honestly. If he said something like that. It's so gross and ugly. And it's actually also not true. Top 10 U.S. states for virus deaths include Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Georgia, all of which he won. He's full of shit.
As usual, full of shit. And it's incredibly callous. He clearly, every time he's asked about how many deaths have occurred because of coronavirus in this country, he immediately like gets on the defense or pivots to something else or just doubles down, and he has literally no remorse for what has happened.
None.
And you can tell just in the way that he responds to this stuff, and he turns it into, you know, a game against the Democrats and trying to, it's disgusting.
It's horrific. I just, it's hard for me to even watch this guy, but you know, it's infectious, and we've seen now throughout the country, people going to Target, Walmart,
oh my God, yeah,
having parties, you know, yelling about taking off your mask. These are the real heroes right here, people. Such bravery. Notice how it's all young white clowns. Anyway, you get the point. There's another one. It's just
they've experienced
mind-boggling.
zero actual oppression.
Right. None. Right. Exactly. It's people who've never experienced oppression that could convince themselves that being asked to wear a mask to save other people's lives actually counts as oppression.
Right. That's the only thing you can say about it. At least I think it's just gross. And I think that, you know, I'd want to think that they're really young and naive. Maybe they'll learn. Hopefully they do, and self-reflect a little bit. Because right now, I mean, it's really disgusting. That sort of behavior. It's gross. So
it's really gross. All right. And then just as a final video, and then we'll get everybody out of here. This is one of the Ben Shapiro clips that I wanted to play, people. This is the newest asshole, Ben Shapiro, with his group of men saying that comedy is masculine.
Comedy is inherently masculine, because it is true. And Norm Macdonald makes this great observation that whenever you were a kid and you'd hear a group of kids laughing, you'd run over there. It would never, he says, it'd never be a broad standing in the middle of the, and it's true, because men, and when you think about the funniest women, Sarah Silverman, who is legitimately hilarious, especially in her early.
Oh, there's one funny woman
emulating a man.
Mm-hmm.
Like what she was. Roseanne Barr was emulating.
Shot 30 humor.
It's not that no woman is.
It's not that. Of course, it's not that.
Christopher Hitchens has a theory on this.
Yes, it does. No, yes.
Smoking cigars.
It's funny. It's that humor is inherently masculine.
Right.
Listen, there are plenty of things that are inherently feminine, and men can do them.
Well, also
that's not the question.
Men purport to be invulnerable, and then humor is about vulnerability, which is why my wife laughs her ass off every time I clock my head on the stove. Whereas if she clocked her head on the stove, I wouldn't laugh.
All right, so that's Ben Shapiro just being a scumbag.
That is toxic masculinity at its finest.
It's so toxic. Toxic white masculine jerks.
As you said, the cigars, like the sitting in a circle sort of with their legs crossed.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like straight out of
smoke room.
I want to say like the 1800s, not even the 1900s. It's like the 1800s.
They missed the century.
Nobody's there holding these guys accountable. This is what's coming to Tennessee. This is what Governor Lee is proud to welcome. Marsha Blackburn is proud to welcome. It's really horrible, and yet they won't even acknowledge the people that they should be acknowledging, like Justin Jones. So you know, we will make sure to keep acknowledging Justin Jones. We'll definitely be talking about Ben Shapiro here on this show a bunch, because now I feel like he's our jurisdiction.
Yeah, he's totally fair game, and open invitation here for everybody watching.
Yes.
And maybe Ben is secretly watching. Come on the show with us, Ben Shapiro.
Come on, Ben Shapiro, bring it on.
You are invited.
Or Michael Knowles. This is Michael Knowles, because I just can't get enough of these guys.
That matters because the climate hysteria movement is not about science. If it were about science, it would be led by scientists rather than by politicians and a mentally ill child who is being.
Did you hear that one?
Sorry, I just can't. What did he say?
Rather than by politicians and a mentally ill Swedish child who is being exploited by.
Oh my God.
He's talking about Greta Thunberg.
So what you're seeing here is a political movement and a religious movement, and
mentally
it's fulfilling religious
Swedish
and political goals of the left, but it isn't doing very much for science.
Chris, you had a visceral
this guy
that.
jumps him. I just want to show this because this guy does a good job.
Yeah,
here.
I mean, you're a grown man and you're attacking a child. Shame on you. She's trying to do what she thinks is right. And by the way, now relax, skinny boy. I got this. Okay, you're attacking a child. You're a grown man. Have some cool.
I'm not. I'm attacking the left for exploiting a mentally ill child.
Maybe on your podcast, you get away and say whatever you want because nobody's listening. You're on national television. Be a grown up when you're talking about children. She's trying to save the planet because your president doesn't believe in climate change.
So that is another of the guys that's coming to Nashville. He is also looking for a place to live. If anybody wants a new neighbor, Michael Knowles is in the market for a place. If you guys see any for sale signs in your neighborhood and you want that guy in your neighborhood, make sure to let him know. He asked on Twitter. Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles. Apparently they have 75 employees coming to Tennessee. Here's what I want to know, and I'm going to dig a little bit because I definitely want to get to the bottom of this. My spidey senses are telling me that they might have been given an incentive to move here.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. We've got to look into that.
Yeah, because the reaction to them moving was so swift.
Yes.
Governor Lee, Marsha Blackburn, you got to wonder, were they given some sort of tax incentive to bring their filth to Tennessee? So we will definitely be looking into that.
Yeah. I mean, they've definitely created with Tommy Lahren moving here, there are all these like conservatives that are moving here, and it's for a reason. Maybe not all of them are for financial incentive, tax break reasons. Maybe some of them are, and we should look into that. But they've regardless created an environment that is welcoming to that sort of ideology here, and that's patently clear.
Absolutely. All right. Another good Holler Hour in the books. Thank you to Justin Jones and all of our guests today, Shane and Nathan and Steven. We are here Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 p.m. You guys can jump on and holler at us. Even people like Derek who are talking a big game in the comments. If you want to jump on here and actually have a conversation, we have been telling everybody who really wants to talk to us to ask for the link during the Holler Hour, and you can jump on here and talk to us.
He has not messaged us. I've been checking, and Derek, we're open. So it's up to you now, buddy.
Yeah, and that is a consistent thing that we're seeing is nobody seems to want to talk to us. Republican candidates don't seem to want to debate their opponents. There's a general veil of silence over the Republican Party and the things that they believe. But we'll be here talking Tuesdays, Thursdays, 2 p.m. I'm at Canoe. This is at Cast Jacks. We will see you guys on Tuesday. Follow the Holler.
See y'all.